European election results are in, with a few surprises along the way. Labour's lost a lot of seats, Conservatives have gained a few, the BNP have gained 2 seats, and the Lib Dems have stayed roughly where they were before. Now this is a surprise to a lot of us, who expected the Lib Dems to come further forward in this European election. Well, we've been to speak to Ed Fordham, who's the Liberal Democrat prospective parliamentary candidate for Hampstead and Kilburn, who's given us his views on the election and the future of the Lib Dems in Europe. Okay, so we're talking to Ed Fordham, who's the Liberal Democrat PPC for Hampstead and Kilburn. Ed, thanks very much for talking to us today. Liberal Democrats haven't gained as many seats as perhaps some of us thought they might. Was this a surprise to you? Were you hoping for a few more seats?
The European elections are never the elections you choose to fight. People have views on Europe, they have views on all the parties vis-a-vis their European stance. But for the Liberal Democrats, it's quite hard. We're pro-European, always have been, and putting that argument forward is quite complex. And that's not to say sort of people are dim or we explained it badly, but just it becomes drowned out when it's actually Europe's a good idea and Poland coming in works because, and actually Italy brings things to the table. People aren't interested in that dialogue. And then sort of inject the national backdrop where it's expensive scandals and MPs are all scumbags. And suddenly, that all is completely lost. My objective, I suppose, was to just fight the best campaign possible for the Lib Dems in my area. We got 21% of the vote in my constituency, released last night, compared to a national average of 14. So, in a way, I'm all right, Jack. Now, clearly it doesn't quite work like that because you're part of a party. You always want more votes. But there is a bit that politicians have to accept, which is voters decide. And you can't assume they'll always decide you. Sometimes they won't.
You've mentioned being the most pro-Europe of the 3 major parties, but the voters haven't reflected that. Might this signal a change in European policy for the Lib Dems? You might have to rethink 1 or 2 ideas?
I don't think so. I think actually the Lib Dems will always stand proud on their pro-European credentials. I actually think, and this is sort of at risk of being sort of a big philosophical answer, as the world gets smaller, as India, China flex their sort of economic muscles, and if the economic picture gets any worse, then actually people will need to be in Europe. We'll suddenly be in a place where Britain, Ireland, Portugal, smaller European countries, need to be in a trading bloc, need to be in an economic force. And so suddenly, and if India enters the world debate on the economy in a way that's aggressive or visible, I suspect Britain could easily swing the other way and the pro-European forces would come out. I also would say we only got 14% of the vote, but actually Labour got, 16%, and the Tories, got, 22% or something like that. They're not anti-European parties, so actually the number of pro-European parties, we've all got different opinions on elements of it, but UKIP got, 20%, maybe 15%, so there's still 80% potentially voting for pro-European parties. It's just not all voting for my party, which I'd like, but it doesn't always work like that.
Big headlines at the moment. The BNP have two European seats. Can we get your thoughts on that?
The shorthand version is I think it stinks. I suppose the longer, more complex is actually people voted for them. Now, by and large, I think people are voting against something, and they use the BNP as a vehicle. I think there is a problem about some of the community relations stuff, and it's no surprise that the North West, which has had one of the more troubled relationships in community terms, is one of the areas that elected a BNP councillor. And I'm proud that London didn't. And I did as much work as possible with non-white communities, with Jewish communities, and with some of the black and ethnic minorities to try and make sure that didn't happen. But people vote for the BNP, so we then have to sort of sit down and intelligently respond to it. I think Nick Griffin's a pretty ghastly creature, and I will do everything I can to make sure he loses his seat next time.
All right, Ed, thanks very much for talking to us today. Well, Ed's given us the view on the Liberal Democrats, the European election results, and where the party's going as a result. One thing's for sure, it's going to be an interesting time living in Britain over the next couple of months. To find out more about Ed Fordham, check out hampsteadandkilburn.org.uk. In the meantime, come back to catch21.co.uk and leave us your thoughts and opinions on the European election results.